My stepsons said I was just a wallet. I took my money away, tossed the car keys, and their things ended up at their father's doorstep. They understood their words far too late. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now, let's get started. My name's Dan. I'm 44, a mechanic from Austin, Texas. I've spent most of my life with grease under my nails and the smell of engines on my hands. After my divorce, I swore I'd stay single, told myself I was done trying to fix people when I could barely keep cars running. But loneliness plays tricks on a man. You start thinking about laughter in the house again, about dinners with more than one plate, about hearing someone say goodnight that isn't a radio host filling the silence. That's when I met Christina. She was confident in a way that made me feel steady just being near her. A school administrator with tired eyes and a smile she rarely meant but always gave. She had 3 kids: Jake, 17, Ella, 15, Trevor, 12. They were polite the first time I met them. Too polite, that brittle kind of manners kids use when they're measuring you. I told myself I could earn their trust in time. I didn't know then that trust can't be bought with patience. It has to be chosen. Christina lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The air always smelled of detergent and damp concrete. She talked about wanting a real home for her kids, a place where they could run in the yard, not play tag between parked cars. I'd just finished fixing up my own house, a modest 3-bedroom with a wide garage and a patch of grass out back that I was unreasonably proud of. When I asked them to move in after 6 months of dating, it felt like the start of something right. I wanted to give them space, stability, and maybe a little peace. I went all in, bought new furniture, painted the bedrooms in their favorite colors. Green for Jake, purple for Ella, blue for Trevor. I set up a small pool behind the house. Nothing fancy, just a circle of clear water to reflect the Texas sun. I even let Jake help me assemble the deck chairs, hoping he'd see I wasn't just the man his mother dated. I was someone trying to build a life for all of them. For a while, it worked. We had family dinners where everyone laughed too loud. We grilled on weekends. We took trips to the park, played catch in the yard, went to the movies. I remember one night in particular. Trevor had fallen asleep on the couch after we watched Back to the Future. Ella covered him with a blanket, and Jake looked at me and said, "He likes you, you know?" It was small, almost careless, but it meant everything. In that moment, I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd turned a broken set of people into something whole. But time has a way of revealing the hairline fractures in what you build. They start as whispers, barely audible, until the whole structure begins to hum with tension. The first crack came after Jake got his driver's permit. I offered to teach him. He said he'd rather wait for his real dad. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. But that night I stayed in the garage long after everyone had gone to bed, staring at the car I'd planned to pass down to him one day. The next morning, Christina said, "Don't take it personally. He just misses his father." But I couldn't miss what I'd never had, and Jake couldn't respect what he refused to see. Then came Ella's quiet retreat. She used to talk to me about her drawings, her dreams of studying art somewhere up north. Slowly, the conversations stopped. She'd leave the room when I entered, like my presence spoiled the air. Once, I found one of her sketches, a family portrait. Her mother, her brothers, her biological father smiling in a corner, and a blank space where I should have been. I didn't mention it. I just folded the paper and threw it away. Trevor was the last to change. Sweet kid, open-hearted. He called me Danny for almost a year, followed me everywhere, even helped in the garage. But kids learn by example, and his siblings were better teachers than I was. One day he called out to me, just "Hey," not Danny, just that small word. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. It was the sound of something slipping away. I tried harder, paid for everything: school fees, phones, hobbies, even Jake's first car. When their father missed child support payments, I covered the difference. I thought if I kept giving, they'd see me. I thought respect could be earned through generosity. But the more I gave, the less I existed. I became the background noise of their comfort, the man who paid the bills, fixed the leaks, filled the fridge. Christina noticed my exhaustion sometimes. She'd rub my shoulders and whisper, They'll come around. They're just teenagers. But her words felt rehearsed, like she was trying to convince herself. Whenever I brought up their father, his absence, the way they still idolized him, she'd defend him with a softness I couldn't understand. "He's trying," she'd say, though we both knew he wasn't. The man had left them years ago, showing up only when it suited him. And yet his name carried more warmth in that house than mine ever did. The dinners changed. Silence replaced laughter. Jake scrolled through his phone while Christina told stories he didn't hear. Ella picked at her food. Trevor stared at the television. I'd try to ask about their days, and the answers would come short, clipped, obligatory. "Fine. Nothing. Okay." Words stripped of meaning. I'd glance at Christina for help, but she'd just smile weakly, as if normalcy could be faked through politeness. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the lights dim, a cold beer sweating beside my hand. I looked around at the house I'd filled, the rooms I'd painted, the life I'd tried to build. Every corner whispered of effort, of late nights fixing broken furniture, of weekends spent earning money for their comfort. But all I felt was emptiness. I wasn't a husband or a father. I was a tenant funding someone else's happiness. Still, I told myself love was patient. I told myself it would pass. People said teenagers were cruel by nature, that I just had to wait them out. But there's a difference between distance and contempt, and by the second year I could tell the difference. Jake started calling me man instead of Dan. Ella stopped saying goodbye before leaving the house. Trevor began to mimic their tone, half mocking, half indifferent. Christina's silence became the loudest sound in the room. Whenever I tried to talk about discipline, about respect, she'd change the subject or tell me not to, make things worse. I realized then that the battle wasn't between me and the kids. It was me against the quiet approval of their mother's inaction. There was a Saturday that still burns in my memory. Jake had friends over. They were playing music too loud, the kind that makes the walls thrum. I asked him to turn it down. He looked at me and said, "You're not my dad." For words, clean and sharp. His friends laughed, and something inside me twisted. Christina was in the kitchen. She heard it. She said nothing. She just wiped her hands on a towel and walked away. That silence, that cowardly silence, echoed longer than his words. That night, I sat in the garage again, hands trembling over a carburetor I didn't need to fix. For years I'd believed hard work could earn me a family. But standing there, surrounded by the tools I understood better than the people inside my house, I finally saw it clearly. I'd built something solid for people who lived in shadows. I'd poured my love into a well that never echoed back. Still, I stayed, because that's what men like me do. We endure, thinking endurance itself is proof of worth. But deep down, the truth was already there, quiet and undeniable. I wasn't part of their story. I was just financing it. When Christina and I got married, I thought it would change everything. I thought a ring might anchor us, might make the kids see me not as a guest who overstayed his welcome but as something permanent, official, undeniable. The ceremony was small, just family and a few of her friends. Jake wore a suit that didn't fit. Ella scrolled through her phone during the vows, and Trevor tried to smile, though he clearly didn't understand why his siblings looked so bored. Still, when Christina said, "I do," I believed we were sealing more than a marriage. I believed we were sealing a family. Afterward, we took photos in the backyard. Christina leaned into me, glowing. The kids stood stiff, hands at their sides, their eyes aimed at the camera but not at us. When the photographer told us to get closer, Jake muttered, "We're close enough." I laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. The weeks after the wedding were worse than I could have imagined. Ella told a friend on the phone, "At least Mom's got a steady wallet now." I overheard it from the hallway, standing in the dark like a ghost. My stomach turned. I'd been called many things in my life: mechanic, ex-husband, fool, but never wallet. That night I couldn't eat. I just sat outside, listening to the quiet hum of their laughter drifting through the open windows, realizing that to them, I wasn't a husband or a stepfather. I was income, I tried to confront it gently. I called a family meeting, asked everyone to sit down. Christina sat beside me, arms folded. Jake slouched, his phone in his hand. Ella stared at the wall. Trevor just looked nervous. I started with patience. We're a family now. I know it's been an adjustment, but I need us to treat each other with respect. Jake didn't even blink. You're just Mom's husband, he said flatly. Not our dad. The words were simple, but they landed like a hammer. Christina didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. She just looked down, letting the silence do the damage. From that moment, something in me cracked beyond repair. It wasn't anger yet. It was clarity. You can fix a broken car. You can't fix a house where you're not wanted. The tension grew in invisible increments. Jake started staying out late, sometimes rolling home at 2 a.m, smelling like beer and arrogance. Ella stopped acknowledging me entirely. Trevor kept his head down, learning that silence was safer than choosing sides. And Christina, she retreated into that dangerous neutrality that looks like peace but feels like betrayal. Whenever I tried to talk about discipline, she'd whisper, "Please, don't start." When I asked for respect, she'd say, "Don't make them hate you," as if I hadn't already lost them. Still, I kept paying. Tuition, dance classes, sports gear, phones, gas cards, streaming subscriptions, everything. My paychecks vanished into their comfort. I convinced myself it was what a good man does. He provides even when no one thanks him. I told myself I could earn love through consistency. But love doesn't grow in the shadow of contempt. Then came the night that ended it all. It was late past 11. I'd been working overtime to cover the new insurance plan. Came home bone-tired. From the hallway, I heard voices in the kitchen. I paused when I recognized them. Jake's, low and mocking. "He actually thinks he runs this place?" he said. "He's just a wallet." Ella laughed. "If he leaves, Mom will find another." Trevor's voice followed, hesitant but cruel in its echo. "This is our house, not his." I stood frozen, every word sinking into me like nails into wood. I thought I'd feel rage. I didn't. What I felt was emptiness. Like the air had been sucked out of me, leaving only the outline of a man who once cared. I walked to the garage, sat in my truck, and stared at my hands. 7 years. 7 years of effort, of quiet sacrifice, of convincing myself that goodness guaranteed belonging. But belonging, I realized, can't be bought. It has to be given freely, and mine never was. I sat there until the sun started to rise, engine off, silence absolute. Somewhere between night and morning, the decision formed. Not a burst of emotion, but a steady, deliberate shift. I would stop fighting for a place they refused to make for me. I would stop bleeding for people who mistook generosity for obligation. When I came back inside, Christina was just waking up. She saw me at the table, papers spread out, receipts, bills, statements. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked at her calmly. "Collecting evidence," I said. "Proof that I've given everything." She frowned, half asleep. "Dan, what's this about?" I met her eyes. "About realizing they're right. I am a wallet, but this wallet just closed." She tried to laugh it off, thought I was venting. But when she saw the stack of documents, car payments, tuition, every transfer marked with my name, the color drained from her face. "You're not serious." I had never been more serious in my life. The day passed in slow motion. I canceled automatic payments. I called the insurance company, the banks, the phone providers. One by one, I severed the lines that connected me to their comfort. Every click of a keyboard felt like cutting a chain I hadn't known was wrapped around my throat. That evening, I left the car keys on the counter, Jake's, Ella's, Trevor's. I packed their belongings into boxes, labeled them neatly, and drove them to their biological father's house. He wasn't there, of course. He rarely was. But I left the boxes on the porch anyway, with a note taped to the top. "Your children are your responsibility again." When I came home, Christina was waiting, panic painted across her face. "What did you do?" she demanded. I didn't raise my voice. "I ended it," I said. "The pretending. The paying. All of it. She called me cruel, heartless, vindictive. Maybe she was right. But cruelty sometimes looks like justice after you've been taken for granted too long. By morning, the fallout began. Jake's car was impounded because the insurance lapsed overnight. Ella got a notice from her dance academy. 3 months of unpaid fees meant suspension. Trevor's phone went dark. The number disconnected. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just watched reality settle on them like dust after a storm. Christina called me from work that afternoon, voice shaking. "They're falling apart, Dan. Please just help them this once." I told her no. "They didn't break overnight," I said. "This is years of disrespect catching up." She cried, accused me of abandoning them. But I hadn't left. They had driven me out long before I packed a single bag. That night, I moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. 1 bedroom, 1 window facing the road, quiet enough to hear myself think. I sat on the floor, no furniture yet, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop fighting battles you were never meant to win. For days afterward, the calls kept coming. Voicemails from Christina. Texts from Jake that swung between anger and apology. I didn't answer. I knew they didn't miss me. They missed the comfort my money provided. There's a difference between missing a person and missing what that person gives you. In the mirror of that empty apartment, I saw the truth for the first time. I hadn't been a husband or a stepfather. I'd been a donor of stability, a silent benefactor funding their illusion of family. And now that the donations had stopped, so had their affection. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever understand what they destroyed with their words and their silence. Maybe one day, years from now, they'll look back and realize that when they called me just a wallet, they were cutting off the only hand that ever reached for them without asking for anything in return. But by then, it'll be too late. The morning after I shut everything off, I felt lighter. Not happy, just free. Freedom doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it comes with silence. The kind that hums in your ears because the noise has finally stopped. I woke up before sunrise, made coffee in a kitchen that wasn't mine anymore, and watched the light crawl across the floor. Christina was still asleep upstairs. The kids were out cold. I'd spent the night in the garage not because I had to, but because that space was honest. Tools don't lie. They don't promise love and deliver indifference. They just work when you treat them right. I gathered every receipt, every document, proof of the life I'd financed for people who thought kindness was currency. Tuition payments, insurance bills, car registrations, cell phone contracts, all neatly organized in a folder. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for clarity. For years, I'd wondered what I was worth in that house. That morning, I had the answer in black and white. My worth was measurable, and it had an expiration date. When Christina came downstairs, she looked tired, her robe hanging loosely, eyes still heavy with sleep. "What are you doing?" she asked when she saw the papers spread across the table. I didn't look up. "Ending an arrangement," I said. "You mean the bills?" Her voice cracked. "I mean the illusion," I replied. "The one where I keep pretending I'm part of this family." She tried to argue, of course. Her words tumbled over each other. Confused, pleading, angry. But I'd already detached from the sound of her voice. It was just noise now. "They're your kids," she said. "They need you." I finally looked at her then. Really looked. "They don't need me. They need what I give. And that's the problem." She followed me as I moved through the house, shutting down the life I'd built. The automatic payments for Jake's car insurance, gone. The tuition transfers, gone. The gas cards and allowances, canceled. One by one, I severed the invisible cords that tied me to them. Christina kept saying my name like it could undo what was happening. But names lose power when respect is gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed what was mine. My tools, my clothes, a few photos I couldn't quite throw away. I left Jake's car keys on the kitchen counter beside a note that read, "You're right. I'm not your dad." It wasn't meant as cruelty. It was honesty, long overdue. I drove through the empty streets until dawn. the truck heavy with everything I hadn't said over the years. Then I stopped outside their biological father's house. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling. I carried 3 boxes to the porch, 1 for each child. Inside, their things. Electronics, shoes, the gifts I'd bought to fill gaps love never filled. I left them there and drove off before anyone could wake. By noon, the consequences had begun to bloom. Jake's insurance lapsed, and the car was towed by afternoon. Ella's dance school emailed, warning of suspension for unpaid fees. Trevor's phone went dark, service terminated. Christina called me 7 times before lunch, her voice shifting from fury to panic. "You can't just abandon them," she screamed into my voicemail. "You're punishing kids for being kids." But I wasn't punishing them. I was releasing myself from servitude disguised as love. When I finally picked up, I spoke calmly. "Christina, they made their choice. They decided I'm not family. I'm just a wallet. Well, the wallet's closed." Her breath caught. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word. You can't just cut them off. Then tell their father to step up." She went silent at that, because we both knew he wouldn't. That evening, the knock came hard, fast, furious. I opened the door to find Jake, his face red, his phone clutched in his hand. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "My tuition payment bounced. They're saying I'll lose my spot." His voice cracked halfway through. Behind him stood Ella and Trevor, both pale, both confused. I didn't raise my voice. "I stopped paying," I said. "You made it clear I have no right to tell you what to do, no right to be a father. So I took your advice." Jake blinked, stunned. "You can't. College starts next month." "I can," I said. And I did. Ella's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. Trevor looked like he wanted to speak, but his brother's glare silenced him. Christina came running down the stairs, frantic. "Dan, please, let's talk about this." "We've been talking for 7 years," I said. "You just never listened." Jake slammed his fist on the wall. "You're ruining everything." I stepped closer, my voice low. "No, Jake, I'm ending what was already ruined. You said this was your house, not mine. You said I was just a wallet. Congratulations, you're free of both." Christina's face broke. She tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. "This isn't you," she whispered. "You're better than this." "No," I said. "I'm just finally being me." That night, I drove to my new apartment, a small, plain place near the outskirts. I didn't unpack right away. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by quiet. My phone buzzed constantly. Calls from Christina, from unknown numbers that I knew were the kids using her line. I turned it off. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger implies hope, and I had none left. I was emptied of it, drained until there was only peace and the faint ache of something that used to be love. The next morning, I expected regret. Instead, I felt clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I brewed coffee, opened the blinds, and watched the world move on without me. It was almost beautiful, but reality doesn't leave quietly. By day 3, Christina showed up at my shop. She didn't look like herself. Makeup smudged, eyes hollow. "They're suffering," she said. "Jake might lose his semester. Ella's blaming herself. Trevor cries at night. Is that what you wanted?" I set down the wrench in my hand. "I wanted respect," I said. "And since I can't have that, I'll take distance." She stepped closer. "You're destroying this family." I looked her straight in the eye. "There was never a family to destroy." She left crying. The sound followed me all day, but it didn't change anything. Sometimes a man has to choose between peace and being needed. I spent too long confusing the two. A week later, Jake texted. Just one line, "I get it. We messed up." I stared at the message, then deleted it. Understanding doesn't undo contempt. You can't unhear years of silence. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about them, not with bitterness, but with a kind of detached pity. I imagined them sitting in that house, the bills piling up, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. I knew their biological father would vanish again. He always did. And I wondered if, when the lights dimmed and the noise faded, they'd realize what they'd lost. Not the money, not the cars or the phones, but the man who tried to love them like they were his own. Maybe someday, years from now, they'll understand that love without respect turns to dust. Maybe they'll look back and remember the dinners, the laughter, the nights I fixed what was broken, before they decided I didn't belong. Or maybe they'll just tell themselves a story where I was the villain who walked away. Either way, it's not my story anymore. I reclaimed it. And that, I think, is what freedom really is. Not revenge. Not pride. Just the quiet knowledge that I gave everything I could. And when that wasn't enough, I stopped giving. 6 months have passed since I drove away from that house. The air feels different now, cleaner, quieter. I rent a small apartment above a hardware store on the edge of Austin. The walls smell of pine and dust, and at night, when the city hum fades, I can hear the distant whistle of trains. It's not much, but it's mine. I sleep without checking the clock, wake without dread, and the silence that once terrified me has become a kind of prayer. Sometimes I think about them, Christina and the kids, but the memories no longer sting. They just drift through like old smoke that no longer burns the eyes. I hear pieces of their lives from mutual acquaintances, bits of gossip that reach me like static on a weak radio. Christina sold the house 2 months after I left. The mortgage payments swallowed her paycheck, and when the bills came without my signature at the bottom, she folded. She and the kids moved in with her sister on the north side, for people crammed into 2 rooms. I imagine that first night. Boxes stacked against the wall, silence heavy between them, realizations settling in like dust on forgotten furniture. Their father reappeared for a while, of course he did. Men like him always show up when there's attention to be stolen. I saw him once by accident at the grocery store. He was buying beer and instant noodles, wearing the same smirk he'd had the day he dropped the kids off years ago. He nodded at me like we were old friends. I didn't nod back. Later I heard he'd moved in with them for a few weeks, promising stability, promising change. Promises, that's all he's ever been good for. By the end of the month, he was gone again. Some debts, some new woman, the same old ghost routine. Jake dropped out of college after the first semester. Without funding, his real dad couldn't cover tuition, and Christina's credit was already drowning. Last I heard, Jake works nights at an auto parts warehouse, the same kind of place where I used to buy bolts by the pound. Funny how life folds in on itself. Ella never went back to dance. The academy let her go when payments stopped. She works the drive-through window at a fast food chain now, her once-painted nails chipped from grease and detergent. Trevor's living with Christina's mother, an old woman who barely gets by on Social Security, but still manages to keep a roof over his head. When I picture them, I don't feel triumph. Just an odd, quiet sorrow. I didn't want them ruined. I only wanted them to learn the weight of consequence. Respect was all I ever asked for, but they mistook patience for weakness, provision for servitude. Now they know the difference. Christina called once, about a month after the move. I didn't answer at first, but she kept calling, the same number flashing like a pulse on my screen. When I finally picked up, her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Dan," she said, "the kids miss you." "Do they?" I asked. "They talk about you," she said quickly. "About how you used to fix everything. Trevor still asks if you're coming back." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear the old refrigerator humming in her background. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For letting it happen." I wanted to believe her, but apology after the collapse is just another kind of nostalgia. "You didn't let it happen," I said finally. "You built it that way." She started to cry. I listened for a while, then ended the call gently. I haven't heard from her since. Life now is small, deliberate. I fix cars for people who pay cash and say thank you. On weekends I drive out to the lake, park near the water, and sit on the hood with a beer, watching the sunlight break across the surface. Sometimes I catch myself expecting to hear laughter. Trevor's voice calling me Danny again, but the wind carries nothing back. Maybe that's mercy. I met someone new a few weeks ago. Laura. She came into the shop with a busted alternator and a calmness that felt like shade on a hot day. No kids. No chaos. Just quiet eyes and steady words. We've had coffee twice. She doesn't ask about my past, and I don't volunteer it. She laughs easily, and for the first time in years I laugh too. Not the forced kind that tries to prove happiness, but the kind that slips out before you notice. It feels strange, almost undeserved, but maybe peace doesn't ask for credentials. People assume the hardest part of walking away is loneliness. They're wrong. The hardest part is realizing how long you lived surrounded by people who made you feel alone. I look back and wonder how many dinners I spent talking to walls, how many nights I mistook silence for harmony. The truth is, I was never part of their story. I was the background music they muted when it suited them. Now, in this quiet apartment, I can finally hear myself think. I cook simple meals, eggs, toast, sometimes steak when the week's been good. The bills are mine alone and they're paid on time. I keep a photo on the dresser. Me and Christina and the kids at the park, all of us smiling under the fake brightness of a summer sun. I don't keep it to remember them. I keep it to remember who I used to be, the man who believed love could overwrite blood, who thought effort guaranteed belonging. He was wrong, but he meant well. Every so often, I dream about the house. In the dream, I walk through empty rooms. The walls echo with faint laughter, then fade. I stand in the doorway, wanting to call out, but no one answers. Then I wake, the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, the world still intact. I get up, make coffee, and remind myself that some houses aren't meant to be homes. They're lessons with front doors. Sometimes customers at the shop talk about their families. One guy bragged last week about paying his stepson's tuition. Said the boy called him Dad now. I smiled and told him, "That's good. Just make sure he means it." He looked at me funny, like I'd said something dark. Maybe I had. If you asked me whether I'd do it all again, I don't know what I'd say. Part of me would, because despite everything, there were moments that felt real. The night Trevor learned to swim. The time Ella drew my portrait and left it on the fridge. The afternoon Jake and I fixed his first engine, before pride ruined it. For a while, we were almost a family. But almost is a fragile bridge. One truth too heavy and it collapses. I suppose the moral, if there is one, is simple. Giving without respect is just feeding resentment. You can't pour love into people who've already decided they owe you nothing. I learned that the hard way, one payment at a time. Now, when the sun goes down and the city lights flicker in my window, I sometimes whisper to the empty room, not out of regret but acknowledgement. You did your part, Dan. You showed up. That's more than they can say. Then I closed the blinds and let the night settle. I don't know if Christina ever forgave herself. I don't know if the kids blame me or if they finally understand what respect costs. Maybe one day they'll knock on my door, older, humbled by life. Maybe they'll want to talk. I won't slam the door, but I won't open it easily either. Some things, once broken, shouldn't be rebuilt. So here I am, 44 and starting over again. No audience, no applause, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally walked out of his own shadow. The world calls that failure. I call it survival. And still, on nights when the wind rattles the windows and the city goes silent, I hear their voices, distant, fading, but there. I imagine them sitting in that borrowed house, wondering how the man they dismissed could vanish so completely. They might never say it out loud, but deep down they know the truth. I was never just a wallet. I was the roof, the light, the steady heartbeat that kept them safe. And when they tore it apart, they learned what the dark really sounds like. So tell me, was I wrong to leave? Was I cruel to demand the respect I had already paid for in years of labor and love? Or was walking away the only honest act left to me?